Today we're going to paint a Prothonotary Warbler, and the photo reference is from Andy_RAUPP on Instagram. Thank you, Andy. Before we sketch the bird, we're going to need to break it down into its component shapes. A big oval for the body, a small oval for the head, sort of a triangle for the wing. There's the tail and the legs, and the beak is sort of a diamond-shaped thing, and then the eye. Once you have those component parts sketched out, it'll be a lot easier to sketch in the details. Before I do any painting, I always do a series of little sketches and also some little thumbnail paintings. And as part of this process, I'm working out the colors that I'm going to use, and I'm working out the problems, and I'm starting to work on the composition of the painting itself. I urge you not to rush this phase of the process because it can be a really fun meditative part of the painting before you begin the actual painting. Okay, so we're going to jump right in. I have it sketched out here already. And we're going to start out by blocking in the Hansa Yellow of the warbler's body. Adding a touch of rose madder to the Hansa Yellow to create sort of an orangish yellow. You can see that sort of orangey color in the throat and a little bit in the head area of the bird. As I'm painting, my brush is moving in the same direction that the feathers of the bird would move. So they're going down and across the body. Much like in the sketch where we were blocking in the big shapes first, we're doing the same thing with our paint. We're getting in the big color shapes first. Here the white of the body is represented by a very watered down Paynes Grey. The wing of the body is also a Paynes Grey, but it's more heavily pigmented and so darker. And like we saw in the sketch, it's sort of a triangle-y type shape. Just keep your brush kind of loose and fluid as you're just blocking this shape in. One of the things I really liked about this painting was how the yellow at the top of the wing faded into the sort of bluish gray as the wing went down. I thought that was kind of neat. I am using burnt sienna here to mark in a few of the details. And I'll also be using burnt sienna mixed with Paynes Grey to mark in some of the darker details. I'm going to add a little bit of shadow on the very bottom of the bird because the very bottom of the bird is in shadow. And we do that with a pretty watered down Paynes Grey that we're lightly touching in there like little tiny feathers. The tip of that tail has some dark markings on it, which is an interesting thing that you don't want to miss. One of the things about watercolor is that it dries a lot lighter. And so when you put a mark down, you have to go back to it later and make sure that it's still the value that you wanted it to be. Oftentimes you'll need to darken it up a bit. Again, these dark details are varying mixtures of Paynes Grey and burnt sienna. Right there, I pulled a little bit out. I wanted to soften that line a little bit. When you want to soften a line, you take a slightly damp brush and just barely touch it. And that'll soften it up for you. The legs on the bird are burnt sienna and Paynes Grey. I'm not going to finish the claws yet because they go over top of that branch. The bottom of the bird's beak is slightly darker than the top of the beak because the sunlight's hitting the top of the beak. Softening the feathers up there. Adding just a little more detail around the face where I see a little more shading. Adding a little more detail and a little more shading in the head. I'm going to add a few marks to suggest the feathers. I'm not really going for photorealism here, but I do want to have this suggestion of a few feathers. Branch that I'm putting in, I have chosen Cobalt Blue, burnt sienna, and a touch of rose madder. I put the rose madder in there because that branch is kind of reddish, and I like that, and I wanted it to be part of my painting. When I paint other elements of the painting like branches and leaves and things like that, at that point I'll diverge from the reference photo and start composing my painting the way I want it to be. So what I've decided to do here is to add a whole lot more leaves than the photo reference has. I liked the leaves in this photo reference. I thought they looked bright and spring-like and really set the bird off. So what I decided to do was add a bunch more of them. We'll see how that works out. When I mix up greens for things in nature, I usually use a blue and a yellow, and generally I'll tone that down a little bit with a burnt sienna to give it a more natural, nature-like green. But the green starts off with a blue and a yellow. And then in places, we'll add a touch of burnt sienna. When you're painting leaves, you keep it kind of loose, just getting in the general shapes. Some leaves, you'll be looking at them straight on. Some leaves you'll be looking at them from a side view. There's also a few dark spots. And I have a Hooker's Green in my color palette today that I'm using to put the darks in quickly. With leaves, you don't have to be perfect on how you're painting them. You just have to get the general idea of the leaf and add enough detail to it to sort of make it read leaf-like. Here I'm adding a few suggestions of veins running in the leaves. We'll do more of that later. And just keep your brush loose. Try and get the basic shapes in. Remember to vary your color. Sometimes you'll need to turn your painting so that you can work on an area better without getting your hand in the way of what you're doing. Right there, I actually added just a touch of rose madder to the green. And I did that because there's a little bit of rose madder in that bird's throat and head area. And when you're doing a painting, if you have a color in the main part of the painting, it's kind of nice to bounce it around in a few other places in the painting. It gives it kind of an interesting, cohesive look. A warning though about rose madder or any red. Red is a pretty strong pigment. Like if you spill a glass of wine on your carpet, it's really hard to get up because of the red pigment, or red Kool-Aid. It's the same with watercolors, so a little goes a long way with red. You want to test that color on a piece of scrap watercolor paper before you lay it down on your main painting. Here I'm adding a suggestion of a few newly sprouted leaves. So one thing you want to notice is that the stems that connect the leaves to the branch are different from the branch itself. The branch has bark on it, so it's sort of a reddish brown. The stems are sort of a yellow and burnt sienna with a little bit of green here and there. At this point in the process, I'm just looking for things that need to be fixed, details that need to be added. Painting in a few of the veins of the leaves. When you get towards the end of a painting, you're painting in things like little details. There's always a fine line between adding just enough details so that your painting really pops and adding too much detail and kind of ruining it. It helps to walk away from your painting if you can, and then come back to it and look at it. Sometimes it's really obvious after you've stepped away from it for a few minutes what the painting needs. You can still see a few of the pencil marks from my sketch. It's super important not to try and erase that until your painting is bone dry. There's nothing sadder than getting too much of a hurry to erase those lines and smearing your painting after you've finished everything. I need to do a little bit of detail on that eye. There we go. Just looking for those last few areas that I need to touch up. Fix the eye again. Just a couple last little details. We're almost done with this. Adding in a few of the veins, keeping them loose and light. They're sort of broken lines, not big, thick, solid lines. There we go. The last couple details. I think that's a wrap. I'm pretty happy with it. Guys, if you like this video, hit that subscribe button and hit that like button. It'll really help me out a lot, and I sure would appreciate it. It's been really fun, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks for joining me.